Thousands of Belarusian workers have been marching through the streets of Minsk demanding new elections and an end to the government's violent crackdown on demonstrators. The country has seen 6 days of protests since its presidential vote on Sunday. Authoritarian leader Alexander Lukashenko was declared the landslide winner, but his opponents say the vote was rigged. Under mounting international pressure, Belarus's government has started releasing some of the thousands of detained protesters. The Interior Minister has also issued an apology to people injured by police, but President Lukashenko has promised economic pain for any workers supporting anti-government strikes.
People must be told that they have the only chance to save the enterprises that feed them. Only by saving their factory will they feed their families. They can take to the streets. There are thousands of them walking, and they can join and take to the streets. But there will be no money, or they will be paid for just 2 days.
The main opposition candidate, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, fled to Lithuania earlier this week. She has called for mass peaceful protests and an election recount. Our international correspondent, Annalise Borges, was in Minsk this week covering the aftermath of Sunday's election, and she told us more about the impact of Tikhanovskaya's statement.
Indeed, it's unclear how much pressure Svetlana Tikhanovskaya will be able to put on the regime of Alexander Lukashenko. She did reportedly leave the country over concerns for her family, her children who are in Lithuania, but also for concerns for her husband, who is still behind bars in Belarus. So just how much leverage will she get in terms of continuing to make her voice heard and, of course, represent this massive movement of opposition in the country is unclear. What is clear, though, is the determination of those protesters to continuing taking to the streets. I spoke to many people over the last few days after Tikhanovskaya had left the country, and they told me they will not stop now. She is not, it's not because she left the country that the movement had ended. On the contrary, they said she had a role to play, and she played that role, but the movement was much bigger than her. And these protesters told me they would continue taking to the streets for as long as they could peacefully and try, of course, to fight for change in Belarus.
Annalise, some of the 7,000 detained prisoners are now starting to be released. Just tell us about some of the terrible conditions that they've been facing.
Indeed. Well, the crackdown on these protests was immense, and as many as 7,000 people, I believe, have been detained. Authorities at first were saying people should not go out in the streets anymore. They would face jail time. Of course, now we saw a U-turn on the part of ministers in Belarus who are now saying they will release these detainees. Well, I spoke to one man who spent time in detention because he was protesting on Monday, and he described horrific conditions and even torture. Take a listen.
Once we got there, there was a row of special forces on each side of the corridor. It felt like all of them couldn't wait to beat us up, and that they were enjoying it. Several times we were beaten with batons. All of the detainees standing there were beaten. Then we were put against the wall in a courtyard, down on our knees, and told to put our hands high against the wall. For me, because I had been shot twice in the arm, I couldn't physically raise my arms. It was very painful. Obviously, they didn't like that, even though I explained to them that I couldn't raise my arms. So they put me on the floor, lying down, and tied my arms behind my back. If this had happened to somebody weaker than me, I don't think they would have been able to stand it. They beat me all over my body, on my back, my neck, my arms, and rear.
And Dmitry showed me some of those bruises. Indeed, he is still badly wounded. He has received medical attention, but now with the number of protesters being released increasing, we are getting a number of sickening testimonies, just like that of Dimitris. A number of people saying they were they were badly beaten, they were physically abused throughout their time in detention, where indeed not only were they physically aggressed, they had no access to medical treatment, they had no access to water sometimes, no access to toilets, no access to legal help.